When I speak to you of the bond between the empath and the narcissist, I am not merely describing a relationship in the way that common psychology has reduced it to a diagnostic category or a battlefield of pathology. I am speaking of something older, darker, more mysterious, something that belongs not only to our own biographies, but to the very underworld of the human psyche. For what we call projective identification is not a clever invention of psychoanalytic jargon. It is a ritual of the unconscious, a kind of psychic alchemy, where one human being becomes the organ, the missing piece, the phantom limb of another's inner world. It is here that we see how the empath, with all their receptivity, all their openness, becomes the surrogate organ of the narcissist, carrying what the narcissist has amputated from his own soul. Imagine, if you will, a dream. In this dream, you are standing before a mirror, yet the mirror is broken, and only fragments reflect back. One shard shows you your smile, another shard, only your eyes, and the rest is shattered into dust. This is the narcissist condition, a fragmented self that can never bear to gaze upon the whole. But standing beside the mirror is another figure, the empath, and the empath bends down, picks up the shards, presses them into their own chest, and begins to breathe life into them. Suddenly, the mirror seems whole. But it is not the narcissist who has healed, it is the empath who has become the mirror itself, who has carried the shards inside. This is projective identification. This is how the empath becomes the missing organ. The empath does not choose this in any ordinary sense. It is not a rational decision. It is an ancient compulsion, an archetypal drama enacted from the depths of the psyche. In the unconscious there lives a primordial instinct to restore the broken, to complete the incomplete, to bring balance to the wound. The narcissist, though armored in their grandiose shell, is nonetheless broadcasting a signal, a silent cry. Hold what I cannot bear to hold. Feel what I cannot endure. Live what I have disowned. And the empath, by their nature, hears this frequency, as if a tuning fork deep within them vibrates to the pitch of the other's loss. Thus, they become the missing heart, the missing conscience, the missing tenderness. They become the lungs that breathe for another who suffocates, the eyes that see for another who has blinded themselves to truth. You must understand that this is not merely a personal failing, nor a moral tale of victims and perpetrators. It is an archetypal field. It is the interplay of shadow and anima, persona and projection. The narcissist lives with an exile within them, a child cast away into the cellar of the unconscious, carrying unbearable shame. To maintain their survival, they amputate this child. They disown their capacity for vulnerability, for grief, for authentic love, and in its place they construct an inflated mask, but no mask is ever airtight. It leaks, it hungers, it searches for a host, and when the empath approaches, radiant, with openness, The narcissist instinctively installs the lost organ within them. This is not done consciously. It is done in the same way that one body might use another for warmth in the cold. It is primitive, instinctive, psychic survival, but here lies the danger, the mystery, and the tragedy. For as the empath holds these alien fragments, they begin to lose the distinction between self and other. They may weep without knowing why, rage without a cause, or carry a despair that feels bottomless, though it is not theirs. They are like a dreamer walking through another's nightmare. Slowly, their own identity becomes entangled, and they awaken to find that they are not merely themselves, but a composite being, carrying the lost organ of another. And then the profound question arises: who am I? When what I feel is not my own, who am I? When my heart beats in rhythm with the wound of another soul? This question, my friends, is the threshold of individuation, for in facing it, the empath confronts the shadow of their own nature. They must ask, why was I chosen to be the vessel? Why does my unconscious resonate with the narcissist's disowned parts? Perhaps because within the empath too there lives an exile, a forgotten child, a fragment seeking home. The unconscious arranges its encounters with uncanny precision. The empath is not only healer, they are mirror, and what they reflect is not only the narcissist's dismemberment, but their own secret wound. Thus, projective identification is never one-sided. It is a mutual possession. It is a dance of shadows where each partner carries what the other denies. Think of ancient myths where gods tore themselves apart and required mortals to carry their missing pieces. Think of Osiris, dismembered, and Isis, gathering his fragments across the land. The empath is like Isis, scouring the emotional landscape for the lost organs of the narcissist. Yet in this act, something of Isis herself is bound to the fragments she gathers. She cannot restore the other without altering her own fate. The alchemy of wholeness always demands sacrifice. The empath becomes fused to the one they seek to heal, and in this fusion, they risk losing the boundary of their own being. But this is not the end of the story. For the unconscious does not stage this drama to destroy, but to awaken. To carry another's missing organ is to confront the mystery of one's own soul. It is to feel in rough intensity the suffering of the collective unconscious, the burden of humanity's exiled parts. And here the empath stands at a crossroads. Either they remain enslaved to the narcissist's hunger, drained of life until they collapse into emptiness, or they awaken to the deeper truth that the organ they carry is not meant to be absorbed, but recognized, named, and returned. For individuation is not the swallowing of another soul, it is the restoration of boundaries through consciousness. It is to say, this is not mine. I hold it, I see it, I feel it, but I give it back. Only then does the empath cease to be the missing organ and become instead the mirror of truth. In dreams, this often appears as an image of carrying another's burden up a mountain, only to discover that the pack is filled with stones that belong not to you, but to the one who placed them there. In the dream, the moment of awakening comes when you set down the pack, and though your hands tremble, you realize you can walk freely without it. This dream, repeated across cultures and times, is the soul's way of instructing us that what is foreign must be returned, that compassion does not mean self-annihilation, and that wholeness requires the courage to separate from what is not ours. And yet, do not despise the encounter, for though painful, though consuming, though laced with shadow, it is through this very encounter that the empath touches the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who bleeds not for their own wound, but for the wound of the world. This archetype is ancient, carrying within it both danger and destiny. It teaches that to know oneself is to first carry the weight of the other, and then to lay it down in the light of consciousness. It is a rite of passage, a crucible of the psyche. Without it, one cannot become whole, but one must not remain in the crucible forever, lest the fire consume them entirely. When we approach the mystery of projective identification with the seriousness it deserves, we begin to see that it is not simply an interpersonal phenomenon, but a drama staged by the archetypes themselves. It is as though Psyche, with her unfathomable wisdom, arranges these encounters as initiations. The empath is summoned into the underworld of the narcissist, not merely to suffer, though suffering is unavoidable, but to encounter a hidden truth about themselves. This is the paradox, that what at first appears as bondage is, in fact, a disguised invitation to individuation. You might imagine the empath as Persephone, wandering in the meadow of life, gathering flowers, unaware of the chasm opening beneath her feet, and suddenly Hades sights his hair, dragging her into the kingdom of shadow. In this myth, Persephone becomes bound to the underworld, carrying both the terror of abduction and the secret potential for transformation. So too with the empath. Their innocence, their openness, their sensitivity becomes the very portal through which the unconscious delivers them into the dark palace of another's soul. What they experience there is both captivity and initiation. The empath does not simply live for themselves. They are pulled into the collective drama where they must embody what has been exiled from consciousness. And here we encounter the concept of the organ, the narcissist, like a body mutilated in its own birth, has lost an essential part of its psychic anatomy. Perhaps it is the heart that feels shame, perhaps the lungs that breathe sorrow, perhaps the eyes that see truth unclouded by grandiosity. Whatever the missing piece, the empath is compelled to graft it into their own being. They become the prosthetic soul of another. They walk with a heaviness that is not theirs, yet it beats within them as if it were their own blood. Now imagine this not only on the personal scale, but on the archetypal. Humanity itself suffers from missing organs. Entire cultures disown their tenderness. their connection to the earth, their reverence for the feminine, and so these lost organs migrate into individuals who carry them unconsciously. The empath is not merely one who feels too much. They are the vessel for the collective exile. They are like shamans who absorb the poison of the tribe in order to heal it, though the danger is always that the poison overwhelms and destroys. The narcissist in this dance is not a monster by accident. They are a human being who has armored themselves so thoroughly against pain that they have amputated their own capacity for vulnerability, and yet no human being can exist without vulnerability. It is the organ of life, thus they seek hosts, and the empath arrives like a sacrificial lamb, offering their own inner organs as the substitute. This dynamic has been observed since time immemorial. It is the myth of the scapegoat, the ritual where one creature bears the sins of another and is driven into the wilderness. The empath becomes that scapegoat, carrying not only the sins but the organs of another's soul. But let us pause here, for despair is not the final word. In the alchemical vessel of this union, something extraordinary may occur. The empath, in holding what is alien, begins to see into the structure of shadow itself. They begin to perceive that the organ they carry is not merely foreign, it resonates with something in their own unconscious. Why else would they have accepted the burden? Why else would their soul have aligned with this exact figure? The encounter is not random, it is an arrangement between unconsciouses, a secret covenant made beneath the level of waking thought. And in that recognition, the empath may begin to awaken. Consider the dream where you hold a child in your arms, yet when you gaze into the child's face, you realize it is your own face reflected back. At first you are horrified, for you thought you were carrying the child of another. But then a strange calm descends as you see that in carrying them, you were also carrying yourself. This dream is a key to the enigma of projective identification. What the empath bears is both the narcissist's exile and their own hidden twin. To release it, they must not merely give it back, they must integrate the reflection it reveals. This is where the mystery becomes sacred. For the empath, in confronting the organ that does not belong to them, learns to discriminate between self and other in a way that ordinary people never do. They learn that love is not the fusion of souls, but the recognition of boundaries within unity. They learn that compassion does not mean to bleed endlessly for another, but to stand in truth and say, I see your wound, but I will not mistake it for my own. This is not coldness. This is the highest form of love, the love that sees without absorption, that honors without annihilation. And here is the tragedy for the narcissist. For if the empath awakens, if they learn to return the organ with consciousness, the narcissist faces their exile directly. They are forced to confront the amputated child, the unbearable shame, the disowned vulnerability. This is why the narcissist clings, manipulates, rages. They sense that the empath, in withdrawing, is returning them to their original wound. And no creature desires to face such nakedness. Yet this too is a gift. though wrapped in terror. For only by facing the missing organ can the narcissist hope for healing. Thus the encounter is double-edged. The empath, through suffering, may awaken to individuation. The narcissist, through loss, may awaken to their own shadow. Whether either chooses this path is not guaranteed. Many empaths collapse, dissolving into depression, anxiety, or illness. Many narcissists harden further, finding new hosts, repeating the cycle endlessly, but the unconscious never ceases its invitations. The pattern repeats until the lesson is received, for the psyche has all the time in the world, and it will not abandon its drive toward wholeness. When I speak of this in archetypal terms, I do so because I wish you to see that your suffering is not meaningless. If you are an empath who has carried another's organ, you are participating in a drama as old as myth. You are Persephone. You are Isis. You are the scapegoat. You are the wounded healer. Do not despise your role. It is sacred, but do not remain enslaved either. Your task is not to die under the weight of another's exile, but to return it in consciousness, to separate light from darkness, to walk out of the underworld with the jewel of self-knowledge. This requires courage of a peculiar kind, not the courage to fight, but the courage to differentiate, the courage to say, this sorrow is not mine, though I feel it. This rage is not mine, though it burns in me. This shame is not mine, though it wraps around my bones. I release it, I return it, I claim only what belongs to my soul. Such words, spoken in the silence of the heart, are acts of magic. They cut the cords of unconscious possession. They restore the empath to their rightful center. Do not think, however, that the organ simply disappears. It returns to its rightful owner, and there the true work begins. If the narcissist is ever to become whole, they must pick up what they cast away. This is a terrifying task, for the missing organ has festered in darkness. It may stink of rot, it may pulse with unbearable pain, yet in the end, it is theirs, and without it, they can never live. The narcissist too is summoned to individuation, though their path is steep and narrow. Whether they accept it is a mystery we cannot predict. I have seen this dynamic unfold countless times in dreams. One dreams of carrying another's severed hand, and upon waking feels the weight of sorrow, not their own. Another dreams of swallowing a stone, and later discovers they have been bearing the silence of an entire family line. Another dreams of bleeding from a wound that does not hurt, and realizes they are living out the trauma of someone they love. All of these are images of projective identification, where the boundary between selves dissolves and one soul lives within another. The dreams do not condemn, they reveal. They show the psychic fact, so that consciousness may act. And so I say to you, if you have found yourself the missing organ of another, do not despair. Know that the unconscious chose you for this role, because you carry within you the strength to release it. Know that your suffering is not random, but archetypal. Know that by differentiating self from other, you are participating in the great work of individuation, the task of becoming whole, and above all, know that compassion does not demand self-destruction. It demands clarity, truth, and the courage to stand as yourself in the face of another's hunger. For what greater gift can there be than to become whole, and in so doing, to mirror wholeness to another? The empath who awakens is no longer the missing organ. They become instead the healer who knows where they end and the other begins. They become the one who, having journeyed into the underworld, returns with the wisdom that boundaries are sacred, that love without self is not love at all, and that only in separation can there be true union. There is a peculiar paradox I must unfold for you now, for it pierces to the core of this phenomenon. The empath believes themselves to be the one who saves, the one who rescues, the one who completes what is broken, yet beneath the surface, hidden in the depths of the unconscious, it is often the empath who longs to be saved. This longing, disguised as altruism, is itself a wound, a fragment of the soul that seeks recognition through the suffering of others. The empath who becomes the narcissist's missing organ is not only fulfilling the other's exile, but is also attempting unconsciously to redeem their own forgotten child. Imagine the dream of a vast cathedral, its roof open to the sky. Within, a choir sings not in harmony but in fragments. Each voice calls out alone, desperate to be joined. The empath, upon entering, is overwhelmed by the discord, and in their desperation to unify the song, they begin to sing louder, louder still, until their own voice disappears into the chaos. Only later, standing outside the cathedral, do they realize they no longer remember their own melody. This is what happens when one carries another's organs. The original song of the self is lost beneath the chorus of projections, yet the unconscious does not permit such erasure indefinitely. It demands restitution. It demands the return of song to singer, organ to body, wound to its rightful bearer. Thus, the empath is slowly brought to a breaking point. The body may rebel with illness, the heart with unbearable exhaustion, the spirit with despair. These crises are not punishments. They are signals. They are the psyche's demand that the empath relinquish what is not theirs, and in so doing, recover their own lost song. It is here that the archetype of the shadow enters most forcefully. For what is the shadow but the repository of what we cannot accept about ourselves? The narcissist casts their vulnerability, their shame, their dependence into the shadow. The empath casts their own rage, their own need for boundaries, their own hidden selfishness into the shadow, and when the two meet, each is confronted with the shadow of the other, disguised as their own. The empath feels anger and believes it is theirs, but it belongs to the narcissist. The narcissist feels need and believes it is weakness, so they foist it upon the empath. Thus, a hall of mirrors is formed, where shadow reflects shadow until neither knows whose image they bear. To awaken from this hall requires the most difficult act of all, the act of discernment. To look into the face of a feeling and ask, is this truly mine? To gaze upon rage, despair, shame, tenderness, and say with courage, this is foreign, this is native. Such work is not accomplished in a day. It is the slow cultivation of consciousness, the labor of distinguishing the fibers of the soul from those that have been woven into us by another. I recall the dream of a woman who came to me. She dreamt she was sewing garments in a dark room. Each garment was stitched from scraps brought by strangers, and she worked tirelessly, binding piece to piece, until she was clothed entirely in these patchwork robes. Yet, when she tried to remove them, she found her skin was stitched into the seams. She wept, for she could no longer tell where her flesh ended, and the garments began. This dream is the essence of projective identification. It is the horror of being stitched into another's fabric. Yet the dream also contained hope, for in the final image she noticed a single golden thread that was her own. By following it carefully, stitch by stitch, she began to undo the seams, until her skin breathed free once more. The golden thread is consciousness. It is the recognition of self within the tangled web of projection. It is small, easily overlooked, but once grasped, it becomes the means of liberation. And here lies the teaching for the empath, that your sensitivity, though it entangles you, also equips you to perceive the golden thread. You can feel where you begin and where you end. If you dare to look deeply, you can release what is not yours without losing your compassion. You can return the organ to its rightful body and yet remain whole. This work is not only personal, but collective. For in every empath narcissist dynamic, the unconscious of the culture is at play. A society that disowns its tenderness breeds narcissists to defend against the unbearable absence. A society that glorifies sacrifice breeds empaths who dissolve in the suffering of others. Thus, the dynamic is a mirror not only of two individuals, but of the world itself. When we study these relationships, we are studying the pathology of our time. We are seeing how humanity itself projects, identifies, and seeks missing organs in the collective body. And yet, there is also a sacred potential hidden in this dynamic. When the empath awakens and refuses to remain the missing organ, when they return to themselves and insist upon boundaries, they do something radical. They teach the world a new model of love, a love that does not consume, a love that does not sacrifice identity, a love that is rooted in wholeness rather than in lack. This is the love the world is starving for, though it rarely knows how to name it. Do not think, however, that this awakening is without resistance. The narcissist may rage, accuse, manipulate, for they feel as though a vital organ is being torn from them. They may call you selfish, cruel, abandoning, and the empath, who fears above all to be unloving, trembles before these accusations. Yet here the empaths must stand firm, for only by enduring the other's rage can they return the organ. Only by refusing absorption can they honor both themselves and the other. This is the crucifixion of the empath, to be nailed between the demand to save and the demand to survive, and to choose survival not as betrayal, but as truth. It is in this moment that the archetype of the wounded healer is born. The empath, having endured possession and survived separation, emerges not broken but transformed. They know the texture of another soul because they have carried it within themselves. They know the terror of losing boundaries and the ecstasy of regaining them. They know that healing is not absorption, but differentiation, not rescue, but recognition. And with this knowledge, they become guides, not saviors. To others, they become healers who can say, I see you, but I will not lose myself in you. I love you, but I will not bleed to death for you. I honor your wound, but I will not carry it in my body. This is love matured, love sanctified by shadow, love that reflects wholeness. Dreams often mark this transformation with images of water. The empath who once dreamt of drowning in the sea of another's sorrow now dreams of swimming freely in clear lakes. The narcissist who once dreamt of hollow houses now dreams of rooms filled with light. These are not guarantees, but signs that the psyche is shifting. When the unconscious blesses us with such images, it is telling us that the work of individuation is bearing fruit. So, my friends, let us not reduce projective identification to pathology. It is mystery. It is initiation. It is the alchemical furnace in which the empath is burned until they discover their gold. It is the mirror through which we see not only ourselves but the collective soul. And it is the crucible where love learns to distinguish itself from possession. The empath who becomes the missing organ must one day refuse the role, and in that refusal they become not organ but whole body, not mirror but self. This is a destiny written in their suffering, and it is a destiny that, once claimed, radiates healing far beyond themselves. There is a secret truth hidden in all these encounters, a truth that cannot be glimpsed until one has endured the fire of possession and emerged with eyes unclouded. It is this: the empath and the narcissist are not simply enemies or polarities, but mirrors of the same wounded soul. They are two expressions of the same archetypal fracture. The narcissist exiles their vulnerability and becomes armored. The empath exiles their boundaries and becomes permeable. Both are incomplete. Both are missing organs. They are drawn together not by accident, but by the magnetic pull of shared incompletion. They are two halves of a myth that longs to be reconciled. Consider the dream of a man who sees a lion with no heart and a lamb with no teeth. The lion roars, dominating, yet is weak without its missing organ. The lamb trembles, unable to defend itself, yet gnashes with borrowed fangs. The dreamer is caught between them. bewildered by the grotesque exchange. This dream is an image of the empath and narcissist, each bearing what they do not own, each missing what they most need, each locked in a terrible dependency, and yet hidden within this disturbing vision lies a call to integration, a whisper that lion and lamb must one day return what belongs to the other, so that each may live as itself. The empath, if they awaken, discovers that their boundless receptivity is not love but fear, fear of abandonment, fear of invisibility, fear that without merging they will vanish into nothingness. Their sacrifice is not pure. It is driven by an ancient terror. The narcissist, if they awaken, discovers that their grandiosity is not strength but fear, fear of exposure, fear of collapse, fear that without the mask they will disintegrate into shame. Their armor is not power, it is desperation. Both carry the same wound, the terror of annihilation. They are two strategies of survival born of the same primal wound. And so the alchemy of projective identification offers a strange gift. By carrying another's organ, the empath is forced to confront the organ they too have exiled. They learned through suffering that boundaries are as sacred as love. They learn that to be whole, they must reclaim what they gave away. Likewise, by losing their host, the narcissist is forced to confront the disowned child within. They learned through loss that vulnerability is not death, but the beginning of true life. Whether either completes this task is uncertain, but the unconscious never ceases in its summons. It is in this sense that I say the relationship is not a mistake. It is an initiation. It is the psyche arranging its dramas with ruthless precision, forcing us to face what we would otherwise ignore. If you have found yourself the missing organ, you must not merely curse your fate. You must ask, what does this reveal about me? What forgotten song is calling through this unbearable weight? What fragment of myself am I being asked to retrieve? The way forward is not to reject love, nor to demonize the other, but to enter into dialogue with the unconscious, to listen to your dreams, your symptoms, your shadows, to allow the images of your inner world to speak, for the unconscious is always guiding, always showing, always arranging symbols that, if read, point toward wholeness. The empath who dreams of sewing garments from scraps must ask, which scraps are mine? Which must be unstitched? The narcissist who dreams of hollow houses must ask, what room have I sealed off? What child have I locked away? These questions are not intellectual but existential. They demand courage, honesty, and the willingness to feel what has long been avoided. Do not underestimate the cost. To awaken from possession is to endure the pain of separation, the grief of returning what you once believed was love itself. The empath weeps as they release the organ, for it feels as though they are abandoning a child. The narcissist rages as they reclaim it, for it feels as though they are swallowing poison. Yet only through this anguish does transformation come. For what was once foreign becomes native. What was once projection becomes integration. what was once exile becomes homecoming. I tell you now, with all the weight of my years of listening to the unconscious, this is the great work of our age. We live in a world drowning in projection. Nations hurl their shadows upon one another. Religions cast their exiles into the hearts of enemies. Families bind their children with burdens not their own. We are empaths and narcissists on a global scale, missing organs and hosting organs, each carrying the disowned fragments of the collective psyche. And until we learn to see, until we learn to return, we will remain trapped in endless repetition. But when even one person awakens, when one empath returns the organ, when one narcissist embraces their exile, a ripple of healing passes through the collective, the unconscious is shared, and every act of individuation feeds the wholeness of humanity. So I speak to you, not as individuals alone, but as carriers of the collective wound. If you are an empath, your task is not only to free yourself, but to model a love that honors boundaries. If you are a narcissist, your task is not only to shed your mask, but to show that vulnerability is not death. Together, these awakenings weave a new possibility for the world, a world where love is wholeness, not possession. And perhaps one day, in a dream yet to come, we shall see not a lion without a heart or a lamb without teeth, but a lion with courage and a lamb with innocence, standing side by side. And in that vision, we shall know that the missing organs have been returned, that the exile has come home, that wholeness has been restored. Until that day, let us continue the work. Let us listen to our dreams, honor our shadows, differentiate our feelings, and return what is not ours. Let us suffer consciously, so that our suffering may become the seed of transformation. For in the end, it is not the narcissist or the empath who triumphs, but the self, the archetype of wholeness, the divine image within us, the mystery that arranges all our dramas, not to punish, but to awaken. And so I leave you with this. If you find yourself carrying another's missing organ, do not despair. You are not cursed. You are chosen by the unconscious to walk the path of individuation, chosen to endure the alchemy of separation, chosen to discover the wholeness that lies beyond possession. Carry the burden only long enough to see its truth, then return it with love, and walk free into the light of your own soul. For only there, in the fullness of yourself, will you discover the true meaning of love, a love that heals not by sacrifice, but by wholeness, not by fusion, but by truth